Good evening, brethren. Let's begin with chapter 20, verse 1. These are the names of the envoys who watch. In this case, will be the malachim or the messengers. These are the names of the messengers who watch. Uriel, one of the envoys of the pure one of the messengers of the set apart one, called the one over thunder and terror. Uriel is composed by the word or, which is light, the yud, which would be uri, which means my light, and el, which is mighty one. So my light is the mighty one. So that's why he is connected to thunder, the light of thunder, pretty much, lightning, and terror. Then verse 3, Raphael, another of the envoys of the set apart one, the one over the spirits of men. Raphael, you may have heard the title Yahweh Rapha, which means Yahweh who heals, or Yahweh the healer. So Raphael is over the spirits of men because he is sent to heal humans. So Raphael, another of the envoys of the pure one, the one over the spirits of men. Ruel, another of the envoys of the pure one, who avenges the world and the luminaries. Avenges the world and the luminaries. Depending on the Hebrew, but because of the pronunciation, could be the one who sees the mighty one. Another of the envoys of the pure one who avenges the world and the luminaries. Michael, which means who is like the mighty one. Michael, another of the envoys of the pure one, who is entrusted with the better part of mankind and the people. So this verse is important because it shows us how Michael is placed over the chosen few. So Michael, another of the envoys of the pure one, the set apart one, who is entrusted with the better part of mankind and the people. That's why we see in the book of Daniel 12:1 that he is in charge of the, he is over the people of Israel, and the true Israel are the chosen people, therefore the better part of mankind. And when it comes to the true Israel, even if we count the many, of course, for they will be the people, from the many, Yahweh calls or chooses the few, because many are called, few are chosen. So the chosen few are the congregation of Philadelphia in the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 3. And the congregation of Philadelphia are the chosen few, the 144,000 of Revelation 7 and 14. And the malach of the congregation of Philadelphia is Michael. That's why he is sent, according to Daniel 12:1, to the world to pretty much gather the chosen few, the better part of mankind and the people. So the few and the many. So Michael, another of the envoys of the pure one who is entrusted with the better part of mankind and the people. Suriel, another of the envoys of the pure one, entrusted with the spirits of the sons of Adam that transgressed in spirit. Suriel, my rock, is the mighty one. Another of the envoys, another of the malachim of the pure one, entrusted with the spirits of the sons of Adam that transgressed in spirit. So those who sin, pretty much. Then Gabriel, another of the envoys of the set apart one, entrusted over paradise, entrusted over paradise, the serpents and the cherubim. So he was the one sent to place cherubim and serpents pretty much in the garden so that Adam couldn't go to the tree of life and couldn't enter it again until Mashiach would come and pay for our sins so that we could go back in. So Gabriel, another of there's a comment that it says it's an Ivrit, Ivrit word meaning orchard park and specially refers to the Garden of Eden. So then the serpents and the cherubim. Remiel, another of the Malachim of the set apart one, the one who Yahweh has entrusted with the resurrected. Because of the pronunciation of the name, at least as it appears there, which is not very clear really, but because of the letters used, could be that it means, and since we are seeing that he was entrusted with the resurrection, or those who will be resurrected, because we know obviously that the power of resurrection and the resurrection itself comes from Mashiach, yet there's a malach entrusted with those who will resurrect, which are a bit different than those who will be transformed as the chosen few. And room in Hebrew has to do with going up or elevate, or in this case, get back up from death. So, Ramiel, another of the envoys of the set apart one, the one who Yahweh has entrusted with the resurrected. So here we see 7 malachim who pretty much work directly for Yahweh. And these are pretty much an exception because the rest of the malachim from the second heaven pretty much had in the past to deal with Halel, and that's how Halel was able to fool a third of them to follow him instead of Yahweh, whom Halel was supposed to represent, yet he just wanted to be the one, or at least like the one, as it is written in Isaiah 14, since he already knew that no one can be above the Almighty, so he wanted to be like the Almighty. For Samael, the first Satan, made that first mistake of thinking that he was the Almighty or the only Most High. So these 7 malachim are directly connected to the Almighty. He sent them to take out Samael when he sinned. And as I have explained, because of the stories that we see in scriptures, and we know that they are reflections or parallels of some things that would happen eventually in time, according to the prophecies. Then, as I had said, when it comes to the Gnostic books, connecting that with the scriptures, of course, the book of Hanoch, like I said, it is in the Gnostic books that Samael is, a lot of things about Samael, how he came to be and how he was taken out pretty much. That story is mainly found in those books. Then in the book of Hanoch, we are seeing 7 malachim whose names we are being given here. 7 malachim are mentioned when Samael is taken out. Their names are not mentioned really. But because of this, and because of the book of Revelation and the book of Zechariah, the prophet, and other parts of scriptures, we know that there are 7 angels that are the 7 eyes of Yahweh, the 7 spirits that see the whole earth, the 7 eyes also of the Lamb. So they serve the Lamb. From those 7, the main one as the Shemesh in the menorah, which has 7 lights, the Shemesh being the one in the middle. That Shemesh would be Mikael, because he is the Malach in charge of the best part of humankind, meaning the chosen few. The one that comes for the congregation of Philadelphia, who dies as one of the 2 witnesses, and then becomes one with Mashiach. For just like Mashiach, Yahushua the first is Yahweh's messenger, Mikael is Yahushua's messenger. And just like the Shemesh, or the light in the middle, lights the rest of the lights in the menorah, Mikael was the Malach sent to give Ruach, or orders, to the rest of the Malachim of this, right? For, I repeat, once Samael was taken out, this 7, and I would say this 7 because I do believe Mikael himself and therefore the others that were under him were subjected to the second heaven, where Halel was leader as the representation of the Most High, just like David was subjected to Saul or Shaul, even though David had more authority and eventually became the actual king. So that is the same story with Halel as Shaul and Mikael as David, King David, who will take the throne. And that's why he was represented by Jacob, which means supplanter, and by Seth, which means substitute, and many other things in scriptures. So also look how verse 2, we have Uriel, then Raphael, then Ruel, then Mikael, then Suriel, Gabriel, and Ramiel. So 7, and Mikael is the 4th in the list. Therefore, Mikael is the one right in the middle of the menorah, because we have 1 light here, 1 light here, 1 light here, and then the 4th is the Shemesh. I repeat, the candle that is used to light the rest of the lights in the menorah. So Mikael is named 4th because he represents the middle candle or light in the menorah, which is the lamp that was in the temple, and that represents the congregation. That's why there were 7 congregations in Revelation 2 and 3, the 7 congregations in Asia, even though there were more congregations, but those were the ones chosen to represent all congregations and to represent all the doctrines that would come about during the apostasy from the time that Mashiach left to our time, the end. So that's how that chapter ends. I'll continue with the next chapter. Verse 1, chapter 21. Then I returned to the place where all was chaotic, and there I saw something horrible. I did not see neither a heaven being exalted, nor a firmly founded earth, instead a formless and terrible place. So remember, we read about this place in previous chapters, a place that had no heaven and it had no firmly founded land, soil. So that would mean that it's outside this reality, at least this earth as we know it, for we have the firmament above us and we have earth, which Yahweh created in Genesis. So also this, as we have seen, is the place where the Malachim will be punished for their rebellion. So I continue, and there I saw something horrible. I did not see neither a heaven being exalted, nor a firmly founded earth, instead of formless and terrible place. There too I saw 4 stars of heaven bound in it together, like great mountains, and blazing like a fire. Here, the fact that these Malachim are called or are said to be like great mountains is important because, for instance, we just read in the congregation the book, well, a chapter in Ezekiel talking about Gog and how Gog means mountain. And Gog and Magog, who will be coming against us at the end of the 1,000 years. Also, how the mountains are used, for instance, when it comes to the beast or the great whore that sits over 7 mountains, 7 hills. And then we see how the whore is over the beast that has 7 heads. And those 7 heads are 7 malachim to whom Lucifer gave power over history, over this time of this reality. So here we see 4 malachim like great mountains. Also, remember in Daniel, we see Daniel 2 about the stone that will descend from heaven and destroy the new world order, pretty much, Daniel 2, and become a great mountain, the kingdom of Yahweh on this earth. So this could be connected to the 4 beasts mentioned in the book of Daniel, also Daniel, when it refers to the kingdom of Persia, the kingdom of Persia, then came Greece, then Rome, and then the end times kingdom. So there too I saw 4 stars of heaven. Stars represent Malachim, bound in it together like great mountains and blazing like a fire. I exclaimed, for what species of crime have they been bound, and why have they been cast to this place? Then Uriel, the watcher, and the set apart one who was with me, and who led me, answered, Hanok, why do you ask? Why do you reason with yourself and anxiously inquire? These are those of the stars that have transgressed the commandment of Yahweh and are bound here until the infinite number of the days of their crimes be completed. These are those of the stars that have transgressed the commandment of Yahweh and are bound here until the infinite number of the days of their crimes be completed. This is pretty amazing because it says it is an infinite number, so they won't be completed, but they will continue as if they could be completed. So until the infinite number of the days of their crimes be completed. So their condemnation will be to be in eternal damnation. And then that will be the completion of their punishment, but it is eternal. So it will be an infinite number of days. So until the infinite number of the days of their crimes be completed. From there, I afterwards passed on to another even more terrifying place. So we see here, as we also know from scriptures, that hell has different levels. The bad part in Sheol has different levels depending on the sin of the person that goes there. So obviously, the worse the sinner, the lower and to the worst part of it will go. So here we see that Hanok went to a worse place. From there, I afterwards passed on to another even more terrifying place, where I saw something horrible, the operation of a great fire blazing and flaming, in the midst of which there was a division. It was filled with descending columns of fire deep into the abyss, but I was neither able to discover its measurement nor magnitude, nor could I perceive its origin. Then I exclaimed, how terrible is this place, and how difficult to explore. Uriel, the watcher, and the set apart one who was with me answered and said, Hanok, why are you alarmed and amazed? I responded, it is at this terrifying place and at the sight of this suffering. This, he said, is the prison of the Malachim, and here they shall be kept for the age. So the worst place that Hanoch saw was where those malachim were kept for the age. And so far, as we have seen, the malachim were imprisoned in the abyss, the bottomless pit, from the time of Hanoch, and they will be released during the fifth trumpet of Revelation 9. So in Revelation 9, we read that it says, "And the fifth messenger sounded, and I saw a star from the heavens, which had fallen to the earth, and the key to the pit of the deep was given to him." The bottomless pit, the worst part of hell, where Hanoch was mentioning that he saw the rebellious malachim trapped for the age. So in Revelation 9, we see that the bottomless pit is being opened, and the key to the pit of the deep was given to him. And remember, it is normally called bottomless pit. And we just saw how in Hanoch, he said that it couldn't be measured. He didn't know how it could be explored because of how huge it was. So, and he opened the pit of the deep, and smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. Hanoch just mentioned about the great fire that was in there, how terrible it was. And the sun was darkened, also the air, because of the smoke of the pit. And out of the smoke, locusts. These locusts are the malachim, the fallen malachim, who are an army, just like if a plague of locusts were coming to a field, how that will look. That's how the many malachim that are trapped there will be when they come out of it. So, and out of the smoke, locusts came upon the earth, and authority was given to them as the scorpions. So they are not locusts. They are something different. They come as an army of locusts in that sense, but they have the power to hurt people like scorpions. Then it was said to them that they shall not harm the grass of the earth or any green matter or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of Yahweh upon their foreheads, which happens to be the name of the Father and the Son, according to Revelation 14. So these entities will only be able to hurt those who do not have the seal of Yahweh on their foreheads, the name of Yahweh and the Son on their minds. So that's right. So, and it was given to them that they should not kill them, but to torture them for 5 months. And their torture was like the torture of a scorpion when it stings a man. And in those days, men shall seek death and shall not find it. This, like this that we are reading right here, in a way, like metaphorically, kind of has been happening because of the scorpions entering people's bloodstream and putting something there that is making them get very sick. And many of them don't die, but because of their sickness now, they wish they were dead, just like it says here. And in those days, men shall seek death and shall not find it. Because of those injections that many people are getting, a lot of people are getting very sick. And like I have said in the past, also, there are certain doctors that have said when it comes to time, the worst would be seen after 6 months to 2 years. So I find it interesting that here it mentions 5 months as the main time. And those doctors pretty much said that after 5 months, everything will get very bad. But like I said, in a metaphorical way, because this has to do when the time when the angels will come up and all of that, and there's still a bit of time for that to happen. So we just saw how the many rebellious malachim will come up like locusts here on the fifth trumpet. But if we go to same chapter, verse 13. And the sixth messenger sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden slaughter place, which is before Elohim, saying to the sixth messenger who had the trumpet, release the four messengers, the four malachim, those having been bound at the great river Euphrates. Those haven't been bound. So there are four bound at the great river Euphrates. And we just saw Hanoch, the first part that he went in chapter 21 was to a place where four malachim were trapped, were bound, like four mountains. And remember that when it comes to hell, is a reality that is below this reality, in the sense that it would be under the land, under the earth, but in a different dimension. So even if we were to dig a hole, we wouldn't be able to actually see hell. But when it comes to space, is there, just in a different dimension, that of the souls. So those malachim, those four malachim, are in the river Euphrates. And it says, and the four messengers, though the four malachim, those having been prepared for the hour and the day and the month and year, were released to kill a third of mankind. A third of mankind. So after, people will be, certain people, those who do not have the seal, will be tortured for 5 months. Obviously, not everybody will be tortured, but those will be the ones vulnerable to the attacks of those demons. And those who are attacked will be tortured for 5 months. After those 5 months pass, there is another trumpet in which the four malachim that were just mentioned will be released and kill a third of the population. And remember, these trumpets are happening pretty much at the very end of the first 3.5 years of the last 7 years. So just in case somebody was confused, the end times happens in 7 years, but the chosen few will be taken up at the half of the last 7 during the harvest. So when it comes to the chosen few and what the Almighty told us and all of that, we are mainly focused on the first 3.5 years, because after the first 3.5 years, the chosen few are taken to the prepared place of Revelation 12. And the many are killed. So pretty much after that, the last 3.5 years, the people that will be left there are those who are not believers, really, or who are really, really lost when it comes to their faith, even if they claim to be believers. So pretty much also like the congregation of Laodicea. Laodicea represents the last half of the 3.5, the last 3.5 years of the last 7. Just like Philadelphia represents the first 3.5 years of the last 7. So Philadelphia, the chosen few, are taken up, and then the bowls of wrath will happen. The last plagues will come down to the earth because of the innocent blood that the great whore shed on the earth. So the first 3.5 years are key when it comes to those who believe. First, during pretty much the first 2.5 years of those 3.5, the seals will happen. The 7th seal, once it's open, the 7 trumpets sound. So the 7 trumpets are the 7th seal. Now, during the seals, so during the first 2 years, 1/4 of the population will die. And to a lot of people, that sounds like crazy, like way too many. One thing I wanted to mention is that remember that there are some people who believe, and I'm sure they lie to us when it comes to that. I'm just not sure about the number. But somebody asked me about what would be the real number of the population of the world if they are actually lying to us about that, just to claim a need for the population and do everything when it comes to the inoculation. So they say there are 8 billion, but according to something I read a few days ago, it is believed that it is closer to 2 billion or even lower. So 2 billion, it said 1 billion to 2 billion, pretty much. What would be the true number, or closer to the true number of the population of the world. And like I said, even if we were 8 billion, the Almighty told us to multiply. He never said stop at a certain point. Therefore, he made the earth with enough space for anybody that would come to this world and would live, because he is the one who chooses who lives here and who goes away. Yet the Illuminati has been trying to take that place, of course. So to a lot of people, a fourth of the population is way too many people, and that could happen perhaps, but in 100 years, 200 years. Now with the COVID, a lot of people perhaps would include it, but with the injection and what the doctors are saying, now it sounds completely logical. And like I said, it would happen during the first 2 years, 2.5 years of the first 3.5 years. And the doctors have said that the complications, the worst part of the injections would happen after the first 6 months to 2 years. And a lot of people are getting it. They're giving it for free and with gifts. So a lot of people are going to get it, even because of peer pressure and all of that, sadly. So according to the doctors, most of those people will die. Sadly, I understand it may be hard to hear. So according to the doctors, 2 years. So now that we read that prophecy and know that from the doctors, and we see how it's happening and people going after the injection, it seems completely logical. It seems completely possible. I mean, we know it would happen, but it's around the corner. A fourth of the population. Plus, they will add hunger and war. So that will multiply death, of course. But now in this part, we see a third of the population. And all of that I just said was so that we understand that first, a fourth of the population. And from that which is left, a third. And then from that which is left, the chosen few are taken, which are just a 0.02% of the supposed population. And the many will be killed, who are a lot too. So then anybody who is left after that will be going through the bowls of wrath the last 3.5 years. So if we were 8 billion during the first 2 years, 2.5 years of the last 7, 2 billion would die if we were 8 billion, right? So 6 billion would be left, but then a third would be killed. So another 2 billion. So half of the population would be left by the half of the last 7 years, the week of Daniel. Of course, if we are less, well, you can do the math. So verse 15, and the 4 messengers those having been prepared for the hour and the day and the month and the year. So even though Yahweh shortens the times, as Peter said, Yahweh knew that he would do that. So he did it from the very beginning, according to the adjustments that he did to the heavens, because they tell the time, the sun and the moon and the stars. And I say all of that because we see here that those angels will come out the hour, the day, month, and year for which they have been prepared. So when a lot of Christians or even Jewish people, both sides, tend to preach that the Almighty was going to do something, but then he didn't do it, that he was going to bring it right now, but then he said no. Like when it comes to Jewish people, they say because of Teshuvah. Either they repent, like if they repent all, which won't happen, if they all repent, he will come, as they say, Mashiach. Their Mashiach would come if they all repent at once. So they have said several dates throughout the past 2,000 years, because Daniel said that he had to come before the destruction of the second temple. So they were expecting him before the destruction of the second temple. So from then on, they started making excuses for how and why he didn't come before the destruction of the second temple. Put curses on those who read Daniel and calculated the times, and also Isaiah 53 and interpreted as it was interpreted before. For even their rabbi said that it was Mashiach that Isaiah 53 was talking about. But after Mashiach came, they said, no, it was talking about Israel, not Mashiach. So a lot of confusion for them not to see the true Messiah. Now, what I was saying is that they claim that Yahweh is about to bring the end, but then he doesn't do it for this or that reason. That if everybody, the Jewish people, repent and turn to him, then he will come with joy and good things. But if they don't, if they all rebel, then he will come with anger. Now, they will not all repent. They will not all rebel. So that's out of the window, pretty much, out of the table. When it comes to Christians, I have heard several times about him like giving more time, or as if he was going to shorten the time, but in a human way, as in we were going to do it on like next year, but let's do it next month. And it's not like that. Yahweh had everything set up, because we see here that they have been prepared for hour, day, month, and year. And I'm pretty sure even minute, but it was just redundant. So they have been prepared for the hour and day and month and year. Were released to kill a third of mankind. And the number of the armies of the horsemen was 200 million. And I heard the number of them. So we just read about Malachim, rebellious Malachim, like locusts coming up. And let me go back to Hanok. So having read that, I think this chapter is very short, so I'll just read it real quick. Then I returned to the place where all was chaotic, and there I saw something horrible. I did not see neither a heaven being exalted. That's important also, because David asked Yahweh not to allow him to die so that he could continue to exalt him, meaning those who go to Sheol cannot exalt him. This reality was the one created for us to exalt him, since he is hidden. So we see him through creation and other ways, and therefore exalt his creation, well, his ways, pretty much. So I did not see neither a heaven being exalted nor a firmly founded earth, instead of formless and terrible place. There too I saw 4 stars of heaven bound in it together, like great mountains in a blazing fire. I exclaimed, for what species of crime have they been bound, and why have they been cast to this place? Then Uriel, the watcher and the pure one who was with me and who led me, answered, Hanok, why do you ask? Why do you reason with yourself and anxiously inquire? These are those of the stars that have transgressed the commandment of Yahweh, and are bound here until the infinite number of the days of their crimes be completed. Remember also that those that will be released to destroy will then be sent to the lake of fire. It is not like they will come out, destroy, and then continue to be free for the rest of time. For them to come and destroy, even their destruction will be another reason that will be put upon them when it comes to the final judgment. And also, if we talk about actual days being completed, and other translations could be checked for this, this infinite number could mean a number that couldn't be counted by Hanok back in the day, because they would be for thousands of years there until they would come out to destroy the earth, but then sent again to punishment. Then verse 4, from there I afterwards passed on to another even more terrifying place, where I saw something horrible, the operation of a great fire blazing and flaming, in the midst of which there was a division. It was filled with descending columns of fire deep into the abyss, but I was neither able to discover its measurement nor magnitude, the bottomless pit, nor could I perceive its origin. Then I exclaimed, how terrible is this place and how difficult to explore. Uriel, the watcher, and the set apart one who was with me, answered and said, Hanok, why are you alarmed and amazed? I responded, it is as this at this terrifying place and at the sight of this suffering. This, he said, is the prison of the messengers, and here they shall be kept for the age. So that's how that chapter ends. Okay, so here's a question. So hell is the third heaven, and before the final judgment day, we go to Sheol? No. No, I never said that hell is in the third heaven. Not at all. The third heaven is up there. Hell, like I said, is down there, under the earth, under the soil. The heavens are above the heads. And the reality of Sheol, where the dead go, is under the soil, on a different reality, but same space, just under the soil. So yeah, I don't know what I said that may have been misunderstood. Just the fact that was not on, like, in this reality, and it didn't have a firmament above it. And one reason for that could be, as some believe, that that part is outside the wall, or and even outside the firmament, but on the side of the earth, pretty much. However, if they were under the earth, as I repeat, what would be above them would not be a firmament, would not be a heavens, would actually be the earth. So it wouldn't look like the heavens to Hanok, who was used to seeing the heavens, if he was taken down. And it's also called a deep, bottomless pit. So it is a hole pretty much under the earth. Now it says, before the final judgment day, we go to Sheol. The chosen few do not go to Sheol, they go straight to the new reality. Well, when the transformation happens during the harvest, the chosen few go to the prepared place of Revelation 12. And then after that, the wedding of the Lamb, then we come and fight in the war of Armageddon. Then we will be in the new, well, I mean, in Israel for 1,000 years. And then final judgment will happen. And after that, the new Jerusalem will come down, and that'll be the new reality, a new heavens and a new earth. Why does the word forever sometimes not mean eternity in scripture? Good question. Because forever could mean forever regarding the time of this reality. I mean, while this reality lasts, all the time of it, forever during this reality. But when this reality of time disappears, ends, that forever would have an end, a limit. So in that case, as interpreted, like I was reading, till the infinite number of the days are completed. So when it comes to this reality, there will be 7,000 years. And to a human who lasts 70 to 80 years, 7,000 years are pretty much an infinite number, or it would be forever. And I repeat, it would be forever when it comes to all the time of this reality. But when this reality is over, so does that time. And it is like in Hebrew, the word olam. Olam means both world and time. So pretty much olam means time and space. Olam hase means this world, this time. Olam haba, the world to come, the time to come, which will be eternal. So to be in that reality, that forever will be what we understand as forever. But remember that even when it comes to what humans use, they use the term forever all the time, and they will eventually die. So to them, forever means while they are alive. And I repeat, even if we were to take it in the sense of a person saying, I will live forever in this reality, that would be 7,000 years. That would be his forever, pretty much. In fact, olam, sometimes they translate it as eternity, sometimes they translate it as age, as in this age, meaning a time that will eventually pass. But when it's talking about olam haba, then they write eternity. And it says, do you find the second book of Ezra to be inspired by the Ruach because it talks about 7 levels for the righteous and 7 levels for the wicked when we die? As far as I remember, yeah, I think yes, but I don't remember that much that book, so I'm hesitant to tell you completely yes. I will have to read it again. But when it comes to that, yeah, it is completely, it makes sense because of the number. Remember that there are 7 levels in the second heaven. So it makes sense for 7 levels to be in paradise and 7 levels to be also in hell. So yeah, it makes sense. And yeah, well, I'm pretty sure a lot of things could be said regarding that. The number 7, right? That's one set apart from the other 6, just like the Shabbat or the Shemesh in the Menorah and the chosen few when it comes to humanity. So the best part would be the part represented by the Shabbat, the best part in paradise, of course. Yeah, stuff like that. And when it comes to the 7 levels of hell, the bottomless pit would be that 7 special part, right? The worst part, and so on and so forth. Also, the righteous fall 7 times and then they get up. So that could be connected with that 7 levels to which a righteous person can fall when they die and raised up once they are allowed to come back to rectify it and grow and go up, etc., etc. So chapter 22, verse 1. From there I proceeded to another spot where I saw on the west a great and lofty mountain made of a strong rock. And there were therefore deep pits. Internally they were deep, capacious, and very smooth. And I said, how smooth these holes are, and how deep and dark they look. Then Raphael, the watcher, and the set apart one who were with me. So in this case, look how, and it has been saying it, yeah, I just noticed it, how it is making a separation, at least one of the translations, because of that word here, and. So then Raphael, the watcher, and the set apart one who were with me. And it says where, as in there were 2, not just, it's not calling set apart one Raphael, it's just saying Raphael and the set apart one. So the set apart one could be Michael with Raphael, for Michael was the representation of the set apart one, Yahweh. Then Raphael, the watcher, and the set apart one who were with me answered me, saying, these cavities have been formed with the following purpose, that the spirits of the nephesh, of the souls of the dead, may be collected, and that here all the lives, the nephesh, of the sons of Adam will be collected. Thus, these are the pits that will serve as their prison. These are made for this until the day of their great judgment. At the appointed time, which shall be done to them on the last day. Last day, the Shabbat, the 1,000 years. And the final judgment, Revelation 20, at the very end of the 1,000 years. At the appointed time, which shall be done to them on the last day. And I saw the spirit of a son of Adam, who was dead, accusing. His lament reached to heavens while he was shouting and accusing. Then I inquired of Raphael, the watcher, and the set apart Malach, who was with me, and said, whose spirit is that, who's accusing such that the voice of it reaches to heaven, shouting and accusing? He answered, saying, this is the spirit which came out of Hevel, Abel, who was slain by Cain, his brother, and who will accuse that brother until his seed be destroyed from the face of the earth, until his seed perish from the seed of the sons of Adam. At that time, therefore, I inquired, observing all the pits, saying, why is one separated from each of the others? He answered, these 3 separations have been made so that the spirits of the dead may be separated, and thus has a first, well, here it says first, and thus has a division been made for the spirits of the righteous, which is by a chasm, living water, and by a light source. Here in verse 10, 9 and 10. Another translation says, and he replied and said to me, these three have been made in order that the spirits of dead might be separated, and in the manner in which the souls of the righteous are separated by the spring of water with light upon it, in which the souls of the righteous are separated by this spring of water with light upon it. Like, not that is the same, but similar to the light, the water that comes out of the throne in Revelation, which separates two parts of, well, pretty much like the few and the many, and two sides of the New Jerusalem. In this case, in Sheol, separating the dead, like we know from Luke, the chapter in Luke, where, and we'll go read it. I think we have read it already, so I will try and be fast. In Luke 16 at the end, it says, and I'll be quick. Well, I'll just read from the 23rd verse. It has to do with the rich man and Eleazar, who died and were taken both to Sheol, but Eleazar was taken to the good part and the rich man to the bad part. So, and while suffering tortures in Sheol, verse 23, having lifted up, so there were some up, the righteous, and some down, the evil ones. And while suffering tortures in Sheol, having lifted up his eyes, he saw Abraham far away and Eleazar in his bosom. And crying out, he said, Father Abraham, have compassion on me, and send Eleazar to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am suffering in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that in your life you received your good, and likewise Eleazar the evil. But now he is comforted, and you are suffering. And besides all this, this is the part, and besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm, or chasm, has been set, so that those who wish to pass from here to you are unable, nor those from there pass to us, nor do those from there pass to us. So here we see it in Luke, and now we are seeing it in the book of Hanoch. So he answered, going back to this part, he answered, these three separations have been made so that the spirits of the dead may be separated. And thus has a first division been made for the spirits of the righteous. One division just for the righteous, which is by a chasm, living water, and by a light source. Remember, there were two different translations regarding this. One that seemed to say that the living water was the actual light source. But it could be that from a light source like the throne, living water comes out, which divides the part where the righteous will be and where the wicked, which is by a great gulf, or has some living water and by a light source. I guess also in this translation, perhaps the translator is trying to say that one is a great gulf, then one division is made out of from living water. So living water divides another part, and then a light source divide another one. That is a possibility, because look how it says these three separations in bold, and then the chasm, the water, and the light. So pretty much saying that the three separations are these. And this one, the great gulf, would be the one that separates the righteous from the wicked, as we just read in Luke 16, right? So that's why it said, and thus has a first division been made for the spirits of the righteous. And then it mentions the first. It has some living water and then a light source. And in the same way, likewise, are errant ones separated. So look how the righteous are in one part, and then the errant ones separated, pretty much in a second division, when they die. So in the same way, likewise, are errant ones separated when they die and are buried in the earth, when judgment does not overtake them during their lifetime, and are buried in the earth when judgment does not overtake them during their lifetime. So there are some, as we know, who do not pay for their sins in this life. So that's why it says, and are buried in the earth when judgment does not overtake them during their lifetime. We know that, well, scripture tells us that obviously they do get part of their punishment, just like the righteous get part of their reward. But when it comes to the full punishment that they deserve, for instance, a person that may have been responsible for killing thousands of people, that person cannot pay with his own life, and he would have to come 1,000 times and be killed each of those times, for instance, to say that it perhaps would be payment. Yahweh is righteous. He knows the true judgment for each of those wicked persons. And so that's why I mentioned that not all of them receive their punishment in this life, and are buried in the earth when judgment does not overtake them during their lifetime. Now, here he puts a comment saying prejudgment Christians, which could be referring to the many, pretty much what we call the many. Then it says, here their spirits shall be placed separate for this, their abundant suffering. Here their spirits shall be placed separate for this, their abundant suffering. So I wouldn't say those are the many. I would continue with what I was saying regarding the wicked who, you see, here their spirits shall be placed separate for this, their abundant suffering, until the day of the great judgment. And it is the castigation and the torment of those who constantly curse, whose lives or nephesh souls are punished and bound there, who deserve such retribution for their lives for the age, until the day of the great judgment. And it is the castigation and the torment of those who constantly curse, whose lives are punished and bound there, who deserve such retribution for their lives for the age. And thus has it been from the beginning of the world. Thus has there been prepared a separation, in this case, this would be the third, for the lives or souls of those who present their complaints, and of those who denounce their destruction when they were slaughtered in the days of the errant ones. So remember that there were three divisions. So if there are three divisions, we have here, 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 and even could have here. So that's why we're about to see a fourth receptacle. And yeah, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Let me put it like this: three divisions. So one here, one spot here, one spot here, one spot here. So first, the righteous, then the first who are wicked, the errant ones. And the way it just mentioned here, it seems to be referring to the ones from the time, well, since we're reading the book of Hanoch, those who were errant ones, sinners before the flood. Obviously, that same spot would translate to where other rebellious ones would go, like those of the Tower of Babel, Sodom and Gomorrah, etc., etc. Then the third, and thus has it been from the beginning of the world, thus has there been prepared a third separation for the lives of those who present their complaints and of those who denounce their destruction when they were slaughtered in the days of the errant ones. So when they were killed, they are in a spot complaining. So this could be martyrs if they were killed because of their teaching, because of their testimony. Could be, but it could just be innocent blood killed by the sinners, asking for judgment, just like the soul of Hevel mentioned earlier. Also, a fourth receptacle of this sort has been formed for the lives or souls of men who were not righteous, but errant ones, for those who are transgressors, and also accomplices of transgression, whom they resemble. They resemble transgression itself. So pretty much spoke of righteous, wicked, innocent, extra wicked. I hope that was clear. The innocent in the sense that they will be complaining for judgment to come down. They could be martyrs, like the ones mentioned in Revelation during the fifth seal of the sixth chapter, the fifth seal, when the martyrs are under the altar, asking the Father, how long will it take? But martyrs are only the ones who are killed because they taught about the Almighty and his Son, one or the other, the testimony or the word of Mashiach. But obviously, there are other people who are not preaching, they are not martyrs, but they have been killed while being innocent. So there are way more of those. So I would incline for that, like people who died like Hevel, being righteous or at least innocent and having been killed, they would be in that part. And if that is the case, they would have been killed before their time. So that's why they would be complaining. The righteous ones would be in Pardes or paradise. And in that righteous part is where the martyrs would be. I repeat, mainly because in the fifth seal, they are under the altar. And under the temple is where paradise would be, which would be the first separation, that of the righteous. Remember also that the temple had three divisions: the most set apart place, the set apart place, and the courtyard, like the few, the many, and the nations. And outside, the wicked who will be going to hell. So the temple in Jerusalem pretty much would be four separations, just like here we are seeing four receptacles. So also a receptacle of this sort has been formed for the lives of men who were not righteous, but errant ones, for those who are transgressors and accomplices of the transgression whom they resemble. Their lives shall not be annihilated in the day of judgment, neither shall they arise from this place. We know that hell itself will be thrown in the lake of fire. So those people will go from being in hell to being in the lake of fire. They won't go out of hell. They will just fall in the lake of fire while in hell. So imagine double portion of torture. Neither shall they arise from this place. Then I blessed Yahweh the power, the mighty one, and said, blessed be the righteous judgment, and blessed be my sovereign Yahweh, the sovereign of majesty and of justice, who reigns over all the world. That's how that chapter ends. I just wanted to make a couple connections, well, maybe one connection of the great gulf that separated the righteous from the errant ones, like the one that we saw in the book of Luke. And that could represent the great difference between the righteous and the sinners. That's why great gulf, a chasm. Then there was living water dividing the errant ones from the ones complaining for being killed by the errant ones. Just like Yahushua, the living water, comes to clean the sins and give resurrection to those who were killed innocently, and through him also comes the judgment for those who kill them. And living water, as in the water that will give them life for judgment, both those who will be condemned and those who will be um, found innocent. And also, like I said, to clean the sins of those who died, also like the many, and even the martyrs, for they were human, so therefore they also sin at some point. And also, the ones that were on that receptacle were the ones whose blood were shed like water. Like scripture talks about those who shed blood, like if they shed water on the earth, on the soil, and that it must be covered, and a bunch of other things that scripture says. So the connection of water and blood is important, like water and blood that came out of Mashiach when he died. So I say that because of the innocent ones whose blood was shed. So the living water will help them. And then the other one is the light source, which was the division between those innocent ones and the most wicked ones. And in that case, the light source that shines on the sins of the wicked ones for them to be condemned for eternity, as well as the living water and the light that will be given to the innocent ones so that they come back to life. So continuing with chapter 23. From there, I went to another place, verse 1, 23. From there, I went to another place towards the west unto the extremities of the earth. The extremities of the earth. One thing is that the west is normally in scriptures a representation of the end of time. And because of the sun that goes from the east to the west. So the west represents the end and also the end of the earth. Obviously, there's an end to all sides, but the west, because of several things, also the Hebrew word for it, is connected to the end of time. And it has to do also with the coming of the first and the last. Yahweh said that he would be known from the east to the west. So he would come first from the east and last from the west. So from there, I went to another place towards the west unto the extremities of the earth, where I was shown a fire blazing and running along without cessation, which didn't interrupt its course neither by day nor by night, but continued always the same. I inquired, saying, what is this which never ceases? Then Ruel answered and said, the function of this blazing fire, which you see running towards the west, is to guide all the luminaries of heaven. So that sounds like the sun, right? Because it runs towards the west. So if it runs towards the west, it's coming from the east and is a light that guides all the luminaries. And the sun is the father of all the luminaries, just like the moon would be the mother and the stars are the sons and daughters. Obviously, it could also be a fire that is above the firmament and it's guiding the sun itself. Could be, if just because we don't see the word sun or any of the terms used for sun yet. Ruel, like I said, could mean he who sees the mighty one, or behold the mighty one, like it's as in Reuben, right? Behold the son. Ruel, behold the father, or the mighty one. So it's interesting that the sun is the one that gives light so that we can see, or Ru. So Ruel appears all of a sudden to teach about this light that goes from the east to the west and leads all the luminaries of heaven. And therefore is the most important when it comes to measuring time. For if all stars are being guided by this blazing fire, then this blazing fire will be the one in charge of time. So the function of this blazing fire, which you see running towards the west, is to guide all the luminaries of heaven. That was short, so let's go to chapter 24, verse 1. I went from there to another place and was shown a mountain. The ground between them was of fire, burning and flaming both by day and night. The ground between them was of fire, burning and flaming both by day and night. I proceeded towards it, and I perceived 7 splendid mountains, which were all different from each other. Look how he's going to a place that has 7 mountains, like Brother Omar just mentioned regarding how the book of Esdras says regarding 7 different parts in paradise and 7 parts in hell. So here, as this title here says, he's being taken to paradise. And look how it says, I proceeded towards it, and I perceived 7 splendid mountains as 7 different kingdoms, 7 different parts within paradise, which were all different from each other. So different levels, different honor, depending on which mountain or which dimension within paradise you are. Their stones were precious and beautiful, and all were splendid, of awesome appearance and beautiful aspect. 3 mountains were towards the east and strengthened by being placed one against another. 3 mountains were towards the east and strengthened by being placed one against another. And 3 were towards the south, strengthened in a similar manner, one under the next. Remember that in the book of Numbers, the Almighty tells Moshe how he should place the tribes around the Mishkan, what they call the tabernacle. And towards the east would be Yehudah. Towards the south, the tribe of Reuben. Obviously, each of those 2 tribes with a couple tribes each. So 3 tribes on the east, 3 tribes on the south, also the west and north. But in this case, it mentioned east and south, which is the representation of the lion and the face of man, because 4 creatures surrounded the throne, one with the face of a man, one with that of a lion, another one as an eagle, and another one like an ox. The ox is the west, the north is the eagle. So the east and the south is the lion and the man. Yehudah, the lion of Yehudah, and Reuben, see the son, the man. 3 tribes on the east, like the 3 mountains on the east. 3 tribes on the south, like the 3 mountains on the south. So 3 mountains were towards the east and strengthened by being placed once against another, which is interesting. Because as we know, and let me show it at least through, not to take that much time, I'll just show it through the calendar. And this way you can see how they were also set up as we see in the calendar. So, well, remember this calendar is in Spanish, so I will have to make an English version. I don't know when. So the good thing is that most of it is numbers. So I think the good thing about numbers is that they are universal, at least in English and Spanish. So I think this can be understood, completely understood by somebody who speaks English. The only thing that may confuse is the name of the month in the Gregorian calendar in Spanish, but even that is close. July, August, June, May, April. So this works. Anyways, the first tribe on the east was Yehudah, then Yisachar, and then Zebulon. These 2, Yisachar and Zebulon worked in the sea and brought food for Yisachar, who studied the Torah, and gave Zebulon spiritual food. So Yisachar and Zebulon were really close with each other, and they were next to Yehudah, who is very important, of course, as a tribe. And the 3 of them were next to Moshe Aharon and his children. So they were the three tribes closer to the Torah. So they received a lot of Torah during the 40 years in the desert. So that's important because as we are reading in Hanoch, it says 3 mountains were towards the east. Those would be represented by Yehudah, Yisachar, and Zebulon, and strengthened by being placed one against another, as they were strengthened by being with each other, for they all learned Torah in a deeper way than the rest of the tribes during those 40 years in the desert. And 3 were towards the south. Those 3 towards the south would have been Reuben, Shimon, and Gad. Reuben, Shimon, and Gad, the 3 tribes that represent the south. And the east represents spring, and the south represents summer. So spring and summer. And now let me go back to Hanoch. So, well, just so you guys remember, these 3, you see 3 tribes here, then a separation in color, green, red, well, orange, yellow, and then blue. That is spring, summer, fall, and winter. And each of those 4 divisions represent the 4 corners of the earth. So, going back to Hanoch, it said, and 3 were towards the south, strengthened in a similar manner, one under the next. Reuben, Shimon, and Gad. Remember that Reuben and Shimon were really strong, and Gad became strong. Its name actually means, other than fortune, means an army, a troop. So Gad is an army, so they were strong as a tribe. And Reuben and Shimon, next to Levi or Levi, were 3 who were really strong in battle. So once again, it connects. But remember, he's talking about a certain place under the earth. But it's important that there are several reasons why the Almighty placed the 3 tribes on each of the 4 sides of the Mishkan, like the 4 corners of the earth, the 4 seasons of the year, etc., etc. So, strengthened in a similar manner, one under the next. There were likewise deep and tortuous valleys, which did not approach each other. And the seventh mountain was in the midst of them. Like Michael, who was in the midst, in chapter 20, was in the midst of the 7 Malachim. These are 7 mountains, and there is one in the midst of all them, the 7th in the middle of all of them, which is interesting, because it would be like the 4th when it comes to how you look at them, but perhaps it was bigger, so it looked above the rest, or just like the menorah would look, with the one in the middle being the most important. And the 7th mountain was in the midst of them, which once again would represent the Shabbat when it comes to the 7 days of the week, exceeding them all in height. What I was just saying regarding being higher, therefore it was the 7th because it was the highest. However, it was in the middle, exceeding them all in height, resembling the seat of a throne. Resembling the seat of a throne. Remember that Yahushua HaMashiach came as the temple, and the last comes as the throne. So exceeding them all in height, resembling the seat of a throne. Pretty much saying where Mashiach will sit. And fragrant trees surrounded them. Among these, there was a tree of a perfume I had never smelled. And of none of those which were in Eden was there one of all the fragrant trees. Just a second. And of none of those which were in Eden was there one of all the fragrant trees which smelled like this. Its leaf, its flower, and its bark never withered, and its fruit was beautiful. Its fruit resembled the cluster of a date palm. I exclaimed, Look, what a beautiful tree. It is beautiful in aspect, pleasing in its leaf, and the sight of its fruit is delightful to the eye. Then Michael, the watcher and the set apart one who was with me. So in this case, once again, now is mentioning Michael, and once again saying, and the set apart one. So, like it happened in previous chapters, it could be taken as Michael being the set apart one himself, the watcher and set apart one. Or it could be like we read in one of the verses that was translated in a very specific way that seemed to show that there were two, the Malach and the set apart one. So it would be Michael and the presence of Yahweh. The presence of Yahweh could be manifesting through the image of Mashiach, right? For Mashiach is his image. Michael would be his likeness. For man was made in his image and likeness, like first and the last. So then Michael, the watcher and the set apart one, who was with me and who presided over those trees, answered me. So I repeat, this verse as it is written could be taken to say that Michael is the same set apart one, but it could be that Mashiach himself, before entering in the flesh, of course, was going with each of the Malachim, speaking to Hanoch and showing him all these things. Michael is over those trees. So he was in charge of the trees of the Garden of Eden. Then Michael, the watcher and the pure one who was with me and who presided over those trees, answered me. And he said, Hanoch, why do you inquire respecting the odor of this tree? And why are you inquisitive to know the truth about it? Then I, Hanoch, replied to him and said, I am desirous to learn about everything, but particularly concerning this tree. He answered me, saying, that mountain which you have seen and whose peak resembles the throne of the power will be the seat on which shall sit the great set apart one, the sovereign of worth, the everlasting king. He shall come and descend to visit the earth with goodness. So the Almighty, through Mashiach. The fact that it says the everlasting king, we know that Mashiach came as priest and the last comes as king. So it seems to be referring to once the first and last become one, that one will rule from that seat, that seventh mountain, which is the highest of all. So that mountain which you have seen and whose peak resembles the throne of the power, the Almighty Creator Yahweh, will be the seat on which shall sit the great set apart one, Mashiach, the sovereign of worth. That refers to the last, for he would be the sovereign of Kabod, the everlasting king, which is interesting because the throne of the power is Yahweh. The great pure one is he who came 2,000 years ago. The sovereign of Kabod is he who appears at the end as one of the two witnesses. Once the first and last become one, then that is the everlasting king, when he shall come and descend to visit the earth with goodness. Because he will become the everlasting king when they become one, like Ezekiel 37, after he dies and resurrect, meaning the last, the Son of Man, one of the two witnesses of Revelation 11. The throne of the power, I repeat, Yahweh Almighty, will be the seat of which on which shall sit the great set apart one. Mashiach is the great set apart one because he was set apart from all sin. And in many ways, he was just set apart from humanity. He was born from a virgin woman. Then the sovereign of Kabod makes reference to he who comes as a king. Kabod refers to kingship. And then the everlasting king, once he receives the kingdom, becoming one with the great set apart one and receives the power. For the power will sit, having him as the throne. So the everlasting king, when he shall come and descend to visit the earth with goodness. This is important also. Visit the earth with goodness, because remember that when Mashiach came, a person called him good. And he said, why do you call me good? He said that there's only one who is good, and that is the Father who is in heaven. There are several explanations for that, but I will try to be short about that. The easy and clear meaning of that is the literal. There is only one who is good, and that is Yahweh. Anything other than Yahweh, by not being Yahweh himself, cannot be called good, for it has a little bit of darkness within it. By only having a bit of distance from Yahweh, there is enough darkness for it not to be called good. When it comes to men, just the fact that we have sinned once makes us not good. Just the fact that a evil thought may enter our mind still makes us not good. So I hope that's clear when it comes to the literal sense of what Mashiach was saying. But now the spiritual sense of that is very important. For in John 3:13, Mashiach says that the one who came down and went up is the Son of Man who is in heaven. So Mashiach being on earth says that the Son of Man is in heaven. And he then speaks about the Son of Man coming in the end times, when the Son of Man comes, like the days of Noah, the days of Lot. So he speaks about the coming of the Son of Man being the second coming in the third person, after saying in the third person that the Son of Man was in heaven while he was on earth. And then when he's called good, he says that the one who is good is the one in heaven, not the one who was on earth at that time. So that has to do with Mashiach first and last. Mashiach came to bring mercy, to bring truth, to bring life, like the tree of life. He came to die on a tree, on wood. In Hebrew is the same word, etz, tree. So he came to die on a tree to become the fruit of life. So when he was called Tov, or good, he said, why do you call me good? He was saying, I am not the tree of good and evil. I am the tree of life. Why do you call me good? The tree of goodness is above and he's to come down later. That's why it says here, descend to visit the earth with goodness. And this is very important, the whole context. Because remember that, and I'm going to have to go back really because I think this is very important. Remember that Hanoch said in verse 4, its fruit resembled the cluster of a date palm. So he's talking about a tree, the one that looked the best, the one that looked good. Like, for instance, what Eve told the serpent regarding how beautiful the tree of good and evil was, the knowledge of good and evil. So Hanoch is looking at a tree that looks so good that he's wondering, what is it? And when he asks regarding that tree, he's told regarding the coming of the one who will bring goodness. So this is important, that connection, because he says, look, what a beautiful tree. It is beautiful in aspect, pleasing in its leaf, and the sight of its fruit is delightful to the eye. Then Michael, the watcher and the set apart one who was with me and who presided over those trees, answered me, first and last, pretty much. Then Michael, the last, the watcher and the set apart one, the first, was with me and who presided over these trees, answered me. And he said, Hanoch, why do you inquire respecting the odor of this tree, and why are you inquisitive to know the truth about it? Then I, Hanoch, replied to him and said, I am desirous to learn about everything, but particularly concerning this tree. He answered me, saying, that mountain which you have seen and whose peak resembles the throne of the power will be the seat on which shall sit the great pure one, the sovereign of worth, the everlasting king, when he shall come and descend to visit the earth with goodness. So he asks about a tree, and we're not done with what the angel said, but he asks about a tree, and he's told this. Like I said, Mashiach came as the tree of life. He was sacrificed to become the fruit of life. We have faith in him. That means we eat of him, and therefore we have life, eternal life. The last comes as the prodigal son. That's why he is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The tree of knowledge of good and evil is written. It is the Torah itself, for the Torah has 613 commandments, 248 positive, 365 negative commandments. That means a negative commandment is not a bad commandment. It's a commandment of not to kill, not to steal, not to rob. So negative in the sense of things you're not supposed to do. Positive in the sense of things that you are supposed to do, like loving your neighbor as yourself. So the Torah has all the commandments so that a man, a person, a human can know what is good and what is bad. That is why the Torah tells us that death enters man through sin. The wages of sin is death. So that means the same thing that happened in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and death entered humanity. Just like the Torah tells us, once you sin, death enter your body. So the knowledge of good and evil is the Torah. The Torah was written by Moshe. So Moshe, as a human, represents the Torah itself. That's why Mashiach said, I did not come to judge you. You already have the Torah to judge you. Moshe will judge you. So Mashiach came to bring mercy, truth, the tree of life. The last comes as the tree of knowledge of good and evil by coming as the witness like Moshe, having knowledge of the Torah, but being born during the apostasy, falls in error and therefore knows evil. But then through Mashiach gets to know good. So he teaches about the knowledge of good and evil, for he has the experience even of evil, which Mashiach the first did not have, for his mission was to take away sin and therefore could not touch sin itself. That doesn't mean that the last is allowed to sin, but it means that the last comes with a different mission than the first, and that's why it has nothing to do with what Mashiach came to do first, which was take away the sin. The last comes, and through what Mashiach did, his sin is taken away so that he can also fulfill his part. As we read in Isaiah 63, that Yahweh saves himself. His arm saves him. The arm of Yahweh is the first. And Isaiah 63, it speaks about the coming of the last. So the last is saved by the first. But Yahweh said, I am the first and I am the last. So Yahweh came 2,000 years ago so that when he would come again 2,000 years later, he would have salvation prepared already, available, so that he could take it and then destroy the enemy. So the point is, the first and the last, tree of life, tree of good, tree of the knowledge of he who is good, and therefore also knowledge of he who is evil. For he was under that entity before he came to know the true mighty one, the true name and all of that. So I hope that's understood. In Judaism, they even teach that the root of the tree of life and tree of knowledge is the same. Tree of life and tree of knowledge, according to Judaism, has the same root. That is to show that first and last are one and the other tree. So I'll continue. Verse 9. But it is not permitted for anyone of the flesh to touch that tree of an agreeable smell until the period of the great judgment, when he shall avenge everything, and he will bring all things to their consummation forever, and this shall be bestowed on the righteous and humble. It is not permitted for anyone of the flesh to touch that tree of an agreeable smell until the period of the great judgment, when he shall avenge everything, and he will bring all things to their consummation forever. And this shall be then bestowed on the righteous and humble. The fruit of the tree shall be given to the chosen for nutrition, because towards the north life shall be transplanted to the set apart place, to the temple of Yahweh, the everlasting King. Then shall they greatly rejoice and exult. They shall enter in the set apart place, and the sweet fragrance shall penetrate their bones. And they shall live a long life on the earth, such and as your forefathers have lived. But in their days, sorrow, distress, trouble, and punishment shall not afflict them. But in their days, sorrow, distress, trouble, and punishment shall not afflict them. 4 plagues, or 4 things that pretty much include all evil, that Yahweh will take away from this reality, so that in our days, for these are the days of the wicked, but the coming days are our days, and they are very close, thankfully. So in our days, there won't be any sorrow, any distress, any trouble, any punishment that will afflict them. Sorrow, distress, trouble, and punishment, like the four corners of the earth, like the four letters in the name Yahweh, who takes away sorrow, distress, trouble, and punishment. There won't be any punishment, for there won't be any inclination to do evil. There won't be any trouble for the same reason, pretty much. Distress and sorrow. And I blessed Yahweh, the sovereign of Kabod, sovereign of worth, the everlasting king, because he has prepared this tree for the set apart ones, formed it, and declared that he would give it to them. Just so you guys know, because it said the previous tree that it was like, it said here, yeah, of date palm. So as we know, the palm tree represents the righteous. Now, this one is said here that they couldn't touch it until the very end, and Yahweh will give that fruit to the righteous, to the chosen few. So it is a very important tree. But as we will see later on, the tree of life resembles the vine. Yahushua said, I am the vine. That's why he spilled his blood like the wine, and he drank the wine, and he said that that was his blood, and that the vine represents Israel, while the tree of knowledge is similar to a fig tree, similar. And well, even in Judaism, they say it is the fig tree, and the fig tree represents Yahudah. So like I said, first and last will become one. So that may be what this tree could be, the union of first and last, pretty much the fruit that the chosen few will be able to enjoy in the next reality, when all is fulfilled, all is completed. So with that in mind, I'll continue with next chapter, but I think that may come later on, like perhaps next week or something like that. So chapter 25. From there, I proceeded to the middle of the earth, and I looked at a happy and fertile spot, which contained branches continually sprouting from the trees, which were planted in it. There I saw the set apart mountain, and from underneath it, water flowed out on the eastern side. Mashiach came from the east, and he is the water of life, which flowed towards the south. South represents blessing, just like evil comes from the north, as scripture says. So which flowed towards the south. I saw also on the east another mountain as high as that, and between them there was a deep and narrow canyon, in which the water ran, which flowed from the mountain. To the west of this was another mountain, lower than the former, of low elevation, and below it, between the two, there was a deep and dry narrow canyon, and another deep and dry canyon between the three mountains. All these were narrow, deep gulches consisted of a hard rock, did not have trees planted in them. And I wondered at the mountains, and I was amazed at the valleys, being extremely intrigued. So he saw a bunch of other places, pretty much, that were emptied of trees, unlike the ones in paradise. And this that he was describing seemed to be the separation that was mentioned earlier, made by water. So there was a separation, a great gulf, then water, and then a source of light. So here it mentioned the river that went from the east to the south and separated the place where the great mountains with beautiful trees were, and a place where there were mountains but no trees in it. And obviously, the not having trees um, would mean that it is not such a nice place. So, verse 1 of chapter 26. Then I said, why is this land blessed and full of lofty trees? But between them are these accursed canyons. Then Uriel, the set apart watcher who was with me, replied and said, this accursed gulch is for those who are accursed for the age. Here shall be gathered all who with their mouths utter unfitting words against Yahweh and speak harsh things of his worth. Here shall they be gathered, and here shall be their place of judgment. In the latter days, an example of judgment shall be made of them in righteousness. In the latter days, an example of judgment shall be made of them in righteousness before the set apart ones, while those who have received favor shall forever, all their days, bless Yahweh, the sovereign of worth and the everlasting King. Yet at the period of judgment on the former ones, this shall bless him for his favor, as he has reserved it to them. Then I bless Yahweh, the sovereign of worth, addressing him, and I praise his greatness. So I will read this again because here you see the title that says Shield for Rebellious Christians, second division, mentioned in chapter 22:11. I mentioned it there also, but to the information given there, it just said there were sinners, just not the greatest sinners, because the greatest sinners, the most wicked ones, were at the very end in the last receptacle that we read, the last separation. So it was a separation of the chosen few, or a separation of the righteous, separation of those who died in rebellion. Because of this could be interpreted as the rebellion shown by the apostasy of Christianity. Then those who are killed while being innocent because of this, and then the most wicked ones, as the four separations that we saw earlier. Here it says something important, at least it seems to be according to one of the couple translations of this book, but I will mention it for I just saw it. So then I said, why is this land blessed and full of lofty trees, but between them are these accursed canyons? Then Uriel, the set apart watcher who was with me, replied and said, this accursed gulch is for those who are accursed for the age. So for a time. Here shall be gathered all who with their mouths utter unfitting words against Yahweh. So that could obviously be like the ones who actually blaspheme against them on purpose. But as I was saying earlier, there are some who, well, Christians who once they know the name, they mock it, they make fun of it, they even dare to blaspheme, thinking that it doesn't matter. And they call themselves believers, Christians, and so forth. So that's why this that is being said here could include them. And there's something even more interesting later. So here shall be gathered all who with their mouths utter unfitting words against Yahweh and speak harsh things of his worth, which is interesting because most of them say it is not important to call on the true name, as if it wasn't worth it. Like it wasn't worth it to actually call him by his name, because if they deemed it worth it, they would do it. So they are speaking against his worth. Here shall be gathered all who with their mouths utter unfitting words against Yahweh and speak harsh things of his worth. Here shall they be gathered, and here shall be their place of judgment. In the latter days, this is the key part, in the latter days, our time, an example of judgment shall be made of them in righteousness. So the many will be an example sadly, during this time, the end times, through the judgment that will come upon them when they die during the 30 days of Hosea 5:7. Of judgment shall be made of them in righteousness. So righteousness is the key word here. It will be done in righteousness before the set apart ones, the chosen few. While those who have received favor shall forever all their days bless Yahweh, the sovereign of worth and the everlasting king. The chosen few will show love to Yahweh, for they will see what will happen to the many. So they will show favor to Yahweh eternally. They will be pleased and love him, etc. So then verse 4 says something important. Yet at the period of judgment on the former ones, but see how former ones is written as if it only appears on one of the two translations. So that's key in italics. So yet at the period of judgment on the former ones, so that would mean on the ones that he was talking before, speaking about the chosen few, the pure ones, the former ones, those who he mentioned earlier, the wicked, the ones who were in rebellion. The former ones, these shall bless him for his favor as he has reserved it to them. So if we take this translation and we take the fact that the previous verses seem to refer to these people being in rebellion, speaking against them, but still being judged in a righteous way or for a righteous matter, then this part could be interpreted as if in judgment they will be justified, and that justification will make them love Yahweh and give favor to him eternally. As it says here, yet at the period of judgment on the former ones, these, the former ones, shall bless him for his favor. What favor? Resurrection, even after rebellion, as he has reserved it to them. So I hope that's clear now. All right. Then I blessed Yahweh, the sovereign of worth, addressing him, and I praised his greatness. So I think that both ways could be taken here, because if we don't take this translation that mentions on the former ones, then it will be talking about the chosen few. So it would be the wicked ones will be judged, and therefore the chosen few will always worship Yahweh because they saw how righteous he is. But if we take the other translation, and even take into account the title, then yeah, we can understand how this could refer to the many. It's just the only thing that I find hard there is that the many really, like I said, many of them sadly blaspheme without knowing it, but many of them really think that they are following the Almighty, and they are not throwing words against him all the time. There's just some of them, and when they get jealous of the one that they worship. So that's why, because of this, with their mouths utter unfitting words against Yahweh, and speak harsh things of his honor. So the only way that it fits there is what I mentioned regarding those who do not believe what we tell them about the name, and those who, because of ego, pride, jealousy, and other things, dare to speak against the name and his honor. So I really hope it was clear, right? Why the two ways of seeing it, depending on how we interpret this, and if we take in account the this translation when it mentions former ones. For if we take this translation, then yeah, it's talking about the many who go against his name and say a lot of things against him. But if we don't take in account this, then that will mean it's talking about wicked people who will be judged, and that will cause the chosen few who will see that judgment to favor Yahweh and worship him, while these would be just atheists and stuff like that. which are people who dare to say things about Yahweh and all of that all the time and very easily for them to do that. So that was how that ended. So chapter 27. From there, I proceeded towards the east to the middle of the mountain range of the desert, and I saw the wilderness. It was deserted, and it was full of trees and plants of the seed. It was full of trees and plants of the seed alluded to, and water sprang down upon it from above, gathering like a wide river, which flowed towards the northeast, carrying the water and the dew everywhere. Chapter 28. Then I went to another place in the desert, and I went far away towards the east of the place. There I looked at wild trees, which exuded the sweet smelling perfumes of incense and myrrh, similar to nuts. And beyond them, I went far towards the east. And I likewise saw another place with valleys of plentiful water, where I perceived aromatic sweet canes, which is kind of bosom in Hebrew, which is one of the ingredients for the anointing oil and oil to well, mainly for the anointing oil, the set apart oil, because I was about to mention another that didn't necessarily have this. So it was used for incense and for the oil to anoint kings and the Kohanim, the set apart oil. So kane bosom, where it says here, when I perceived aromatic sweet canes, which resemble the mastic tree. Kane bosom, yeah, that is what is said to be, what is known as cannabis, kane bosom in Hebrew. So continuing, and towards the sides of the three, and towards the sides of these valleys, I saw cinnamon of a sweet fragrance. Look how it mentioned in the previous chapter. There I looked at wild trees which exuded the sweet smelling perfumes of incense and myrrh, similar to nuts. Myrrh, which is also part of well, the gifts that were given to Mashiach and represent his pain, the suffering that he would go through. For women were covered in myrrh, and it caused a lot of pain, but it brought like a new skin for them, and they would smell amazing forever because it was now in their skin. So they would bathe in myrrh for 6 months, and then their whole skin would be new and smelling all the time good. And that's pretty much what Esther went through when she became the queen. When Ahashverosh was looking for one. So then it talked about incense. And like I said, cannabism, is connected to the anointing oil and the incense. And that's what we find in chapter 29. I likewise saw another place with valleys of plentiful water, where I perceived aromatic sweet canes, which resemble the mastic tree. And towards the sides of these valleys, I saw cinnamon, which is another ingredient for the anointing oil, of a sweet fragrance. And beyond those valleys, I went away towards the east. That's how that one ends. Chapter 30. Other mountains were shown to me, and also in them I saw trees, from which resin flowed like a nectar, whose name was Tsaru and Galbanum. And beyond this mountain, all of the trees were full of resin of aloe, which resembled the bark of the almond trees. And when these trees are peeled, a strong perfume odor is emitted. And when their barks are ground, they are superior to any perfume. Myrrh is taken from trees. After making cuts to the tree bleeds pretty much because of the cuts, and they leave it there for a while, and then they come and take everything that comes out of those cuts. So that's why it represents the pain and the suffering of Mashiach that Mashiach would go through. Because for the myrrh to come out, and it is a very important ingredient, spiritual ingredient, for the myrrh to come out, they would have to make cuts to the tree. Mashiach, being the tree of life, was cut, and that is the suffering represented by the myrrh that was given to him. And I say all of that because myrrh was mentioned already, and now here something is being mentioned that is very similar to the way that myrrh is obtained. So, which resemble the bark of the almond trees, and when the trees are peeled, a strong perfume odor is emitted, and when their barks are ground, they are superior to any perfume. So now that it's it,